Well, hello there, traveler. How would you like to join me as I create this digital game board for tabletop games? Or you can follow along with a few extra steps and create this convertible coffee table. If that sounds good to you, go ahead and grab some tools and follow me as we level up our crafting. My name is Tom Tovar and welcome to Level Up Crafting. The first stage of this project will give you a digital display that can fit on top of a kitchen table. This is great for those types of people who don't have a dedicated space for their games. To complete this tabletop version of the project, you'll not be required to have a lot of specialized tools or skills, and for this reason, I would say it's a great project for beginners. The second stage of this project will leave you with a coffee table with a removable lid. This is great for those people who want to have a more dedicated solution, but don't want the display visible at all times. This portion of the project will require some additional skills and tools, but for the most part, it's fairly easy to build. Here is a list of the supplies that you'll need for the first stage of this project. Alright, the most important part of any digital game board is the TV that you use. I do not suggest buying a brand new TV. First off, new TVs have a lot of features you just plain don't need to have for a digital game board. You don't need a smart TV with Netflix, 4K resolution, and all the other features that come with today. I would suggest going to a personal reseller, for example like OfferUp or Facebook Marketplace. Yes, there are scammers on these sites, and yes, you should always be careful when dealing with people that you just don't know. But many of the people on these sites honestly just want to get rid of things that would be very useful for you at very, very low prices. All right, now that you know where to get your TV on the cheap, let's go ahead and look at some of the specifics that you're going to need for that TV. First off, you need a flat screen TV, not a curved one. That one should be kind of obvious. You need to have a 40-inch or smaller for a portable TV top, and you need to be really considering the weight when considering these TVs as well. The older the TV is, traditionally, the heavier it's going to be, so keep that in mind when you're looking. For the coffee table build, you can go up to 50 inches or more if you really wanted to. Weight should still be considered, however, it's less of an issue since the table itself will be supporting the TV. 1080p resolution is perfectly fine for almost every single case. But even some 720p TVs are perfectly usable. Also make sure that the TV that you're looking at has at least one HDMI port and has working speakers. When considering the TV, also make sure that you're looking for a perfectly rectangular edges on the TV itself. It shouldn't have any kind of extrusions or overly thick borders on the TV as well. A removable base is also very important. If the TV has mounting brackets, it should have a removable base as well. Pay special attention to the thickness of the TV as well. At its thickest point, it should be around anywhere from 3 to 4 inches, and that should be perfectly fine. Some of the older TVs that you can find out there, however, have absolutely massive backsides, which, of course, will not work in any of the scenarios. If you're paying $50 or more, you're spending way too much money. I did a quick search on these requirements on OfferUp, and I found a number of TVs that all fit my specifications, and all of them were within 30 miles of my location. Here is the TV that I found on OfferUp, and it only cost me $40. I'll be turning this TV into the coffee table build, so I opted for 50 inches. It's a bit big, but I don't plan on moving it very much, especially because it's a little heavier than I would have liked as well. Once you've found your TV, it's time to start doing some measurements. The first measurement is the length, then the width, and then the height at its deepest part. In the end, we want to build a box around the TV. For me, that TV is 46 inches for the length, 28 inches for the width, and about 5 inches for the depth of this TV at its deepest part. Remember that the wood needs to overlap in order to connect. Because the thickness of the wood I'm buying is about 3/4 of an inch thick and not 1 inch like it says on the labels, I'm going to need to add 3/4 of an inch on one side and on the other side of the length. 3/4 plus 3/4 is 1 1/2. I'm also going to add an additional 1/4 inch to the ends, because I want to make it enough room for the TV to get in and out without damaging the frame or the TV. That means when I'm out buying wood, I need to cut it at about 48 inches and not 46 inches. Okay, now that you have all your measurements, it's time to take those measurements to the store and start buying your wood. When you get to the store, you'll find that there are 3 different types of bins for woods. First is a common board. Common boards are sold as is. They're cheap because they have lots of knots, scratches, chips, and even staples inside them. In the end, the strength of these boards can be questionable at times. The second grouping of boards you'll find is softwoods. Softwoods are sold by the board and are a great mid-price board. Because they're soft, they leave indentions if something hard is pressed up against them. The last grouping of board that you'll find are called hardwoods. Hardwoods are great woods, however, they're not sold by the board, they're sold by the foot. That means that the cost of these boards can escalate quickly. They're great because they can come in a lot of great colors and they hold up to abuse really, really well. When buying your wood, it's always important to look to see if it has any bows, twists, or cups. A twist is pretty simple. A twist will have a twist in the wood. It's easy to find out if a board has a twist because if you lay it down flat, it'll wobble and rock back and forth. On the other hand, a bow is just like a bow and arrow. It has a curve to it. Small twists are okay for the most part. However, if you end up with a board that has a bow in it, it's very hard to get rid of it unless you have some specialized tools. The same thing is true of a cup. If you end up with too drastic of a cup, then you'll end up with some really bad situations when you get to your projects. In order to check your wood to see if it has any bows, twists, or cups in it, take the wood on its end and look down with one eye on the edge of the wood. You'll easily be able to see if it twists, bows, or cups. Then make sure to flip it over and check that other side, and then check the faces with one eye closed as well. This is the easy way to go ahead and look through all of your wood. Don't be afraid to keep going through each pile until you find the wood that's right for you. Getting 8-foot long boards home is not reasonable for most people. This is why they have cutting tools in the backs of the shops. You'll need to get the attention of someone who works there in order to make the cuts for you, but this makes things a lot easier in getting them home. Do your best to have them cut the wood slightly longer than you need. You can always make the final cuts at home on your miter station. Now we've gone ahead and cut our wood to the correct sizes, it's now time for us to get these pieces and connect them together. This is actually called a butt joint. Now there are a number of ways to create butt joints, but unless you already know some of these ways, for example, a dovetail joint or some other similar jointing techniques, I'm going to recommend that you use a pocket hole jig. Pocket holes are great because they're easy to use, especially for beginners, and they're relatively strong. They work by drilling a hole at an angle into one piece of wood and into the face grain of another second piece of wood. When using a pocket hole jig, it's important to remember 2 things. Number 1, never connect into the end grain of one of your woods. The reason you don't want to do this is because the end grain is not very strong. It doesn't hold on to a lot of the screws. The second thing to remember is that when using pocket holes, always go from the outside in. In other words, if I'm going in through this piece of wood, it needs to connect to the longer piece on this side. However, you do not want to connect from the inside out. If you do it in this direction, what ends up happening is that there's not enough material here on the end, and it'll end up splitting your wood. Always go from the outside in. When connecting 2 pieces of wood together, it's extremely important to keep them straight. For this reason, I highly recommend using a corner clamp. These types of corner clamps are great because they hold onto the wood tightly so that your wood doesn't slip or move when drilling in with a screw. Before screwing in your joints, it's important to add a healthy amount of glue to connect the pieces together. Wood glue is actually the source of most of the strength of this connection. You'll know that you've added enough glue because when you finish screwing in your pocket holes, a few beads of glue will pop out from the sides. Once the side frame is complete, it's time to do a test fit and start building the TV supports from underneath. I'm going to be adding a board to the inside with pocket holes along the sides to add some support to the frame and to provide a space for the legs of my coffee table. For now, I'm only going to place a few back supports to the TV. Notice I'm not concerned about keeping the back supports level. Instead, I am lightly pressing them against the TV and then attaching them at the angles that they land in. In order to cover up the pocket holes in the areas that people will see, there are pocket hole plugs. Simply put some glue in the hole and press the plug inside. Once they're dry, it's easy to sand them flat and cover with paint. No one likes to sand. However, it's important to have a clean and nice finished product. Start with an 80 grit sandpaper to remove large amounts of wood, for example those pocket hole plugs. Then sand the surface with 120 grit and finally 220 grit. 220 is a great stopping point for most wood projects. I'm going to be adding some rubber feet to the bottom of my frame at this point and add a hole on the side to help with cord management. At this point, you have a choice to make. You can put some spray paint and just finish the project right here and right now, or you can get a little fancy and use some stain and some wood finish. If you go with the spray paint option, it'll cost you around $7 to complete. If you go the staining route, it'll probably cost you a little bit more, like $42 to complete. For my main table that I use, spray paint did the job. I didn't even need to use any pocket hole plugs at all either. In all the years that I've been playing with this setup, I've never had anybody complain. On the other hand, the stain just does look really amazing, and it makes the whole project look a little bit more professional. So that's what I'm going to be doing for my project. First, I need to coat the entire project with wood conditioner. The reason that this is so important is because staining pine wood usually creates ugly patches of color. The conditioner helps the stain set a lot more evenly. After an hour of letting it dry, I get to work with my stain. As you can see, I am putting a nice healthy amount in. Keep in mind, stain stains everything. So do this over a tarp or something that you don't mind getting stained. Once the stain is dry, I'll take a cloth and wipe away any of the stain that did not get soaked into the wood. After about a day of drying, I'll use some wipe-on poly to create a nice finish. Wipe-on poly creates a really strong and beautiful finish to any type of project. Keep in mind that gloves are highly needed here. Wipe-on poly is extremely sticky and hard to get off your hands. Try to apply the wipe-on poly in long, straight lines to match the wood grain. Once dry, I do this another 2 to 3 times depending on how thick I want the finish to be. In between each one of these applications, I'll take some of that 220 grit sandpaper and lightly knock off anything that may have gotten onto the top of my coat. That way, it's nice and smooth and great to touch. At this point, it's time to add the TV and add a few more supports to the back. Keep in mind that your TV is just sitting on those supports. If you wanted to add a little bit more security to the front end of this, you could add some brackets to the corners holding your TV from the front end. At this point, call over your friends, plug in your computer, and start running some amazing games. However, if you want to take your project to the next level, it'll only take a few extra steps in order to turn this project into a coffee table. Let's go ahead and get started with that now. Okay, first things first. Let's talk about the extra tools and supplies that you'll need in order to create the coffee table version of this project. With the TV now outside of the frame, I'm going to flip over the frame and drill holes into the side frame. I will use bolts to secure the legs in place. When I first planned out this build, I wanted to try out these legs. However, when it came in, I had to adjust my plans to fit a bigger TV. That means that the 2 legs that I had previously planned on were not enough to hold up the TV that I had purchased. As you can see here, I had to purchase a total of 4 legs instead of the 2 that I had planned. If I had been a better planner, I would have either gotten different legs, or even better, had made the legs myself, and I probably would have saved myself around $50. For the tabletop, I need to joint together 3 planks of wood side by side. Joint is just a fancy word that means that the sides of the wood have to be perfectly straight for each of them to make the seam completely disappear when I place the wood together. I've made a few tabletops in the past few years, and in the past I've always used a jig like this one right over here. My jig, however, broke, and so instead of building a new one, I thought it would be a great idea to try out a different technique. This was my second mistake. As you can see here, the plan was to use a long level and push the wood alongside my fence. It was a great idea, and it would have most likely worked if my table saw had been flat all the way out to the fence. It, however, was not, and so I ended up having to joint my tabletop a few times to get it right. In order to make the tabletop flat, I like to use dowels. Dowels are easy to use. Simply use the drill bit provided and go to town. Once all the holes are made in your first piece of wood, line up the second board. Start by placing the dowel inside the original hole. Place the dowel inside the drill hole of the jig. This helps set the red level of the jig. Once locked in place, flip the jig around using the same dowel as a guide to line up your drill hole on the new piece of wood. Once all the holes have been drilled, add glue to the dowels and the wood and clamp them together. For a table of this size, I would use at the very least 3 long clamps. The more you use, the better. Do your best not to over-tighten those clamps, or else you'll end up damaging the wood as well. Once the glue dries up, do the exact same thing all over again for the third board. Once complete, I like to add a breadboard to the end. A breadboard is a great thing because it helps keep the wood straight, and it also looks really nice. First, cut the ends of the board to make everything flat. Then use the dowel jig and clamps once again. Another great technique to use when you're gluing panels together is to use cawls. These 2x4s on the top and the bottom of the board are helping keep the wood straight while it dries. Once complete, it's time to add the apron. This apron serves 2 purposes. One, it also helps the tabletop stay flat as well. And secondly, it creates a border for the TV frame to sit around. This will help the tabletop stay in place. Assemble the apron the exact same way as the original TV frame. My apron was made to be 1.5 inches thick. Then add a number of pocket holes and connect it to the tabletop. Now that the tabletop has been assembled, it's time to start sanding again. Yes, just like before, we're going to start off with the 80 grit sandpaper and work our way up to the 220 grit sandpaper. Make sure to remove all the glue from the tabletop as well. Glue does not absorb stain. That's very important. I'm also going to take this moment to start rounding off a lot of my edges as well. This will make my tabletop a lot softer on the sides and not so sharp. Now that everything is sanded and connected, it's time to use the wood conditioner, stain, and wipe on poly just like we did before. After everything dries, place the tabletop back on top of your game table and enjoy the fruits of your labor. In the end, this project cost me around $300 to build, from start to finish, and it took me about a week. I hope that this project has given you some insights on how to build a table just like this for yourself. This is the very first time I've done a video like this, and I've learned a lot along the way. It took me almost a month to build this video in particular. Let me know down in the comments whether you like this video and you'd like to see more in the future. Also let me know in the comments what kind of a project you'd like to see in our next video. Until next time, I hope all of your projects go well, and I look forward to seeing you next time when we can level up our crafting together.